Hey there, hi there, ho there. I'm as happy as can be. BREWSTRONG. Brew strong, brew strong.
What is this? The Disney hour?
I like it.
Inspiration. That's all I can say.
That's right. That's where the hey howdy hey comes from. Is some Disney thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I told the story long ago about we were on some road trip out to God knows where in the old RV,
Uh-huh.
Still kicking.
the beater RV, and we were listening to some Disney songs, and one of them had that in it, and my daughter was big on that song, and so I told her, I said, I'll use that for the show, and so I have not gotten any sort of legal notice from Disney tonight. You say howdy hey, but it has lasted since then. That was like 9 years ago or something.
Yeah,
Insane,
no doubt.
insane amount of time. Speaking of insane, have you seen our good friend John Blickman recently?
Not since HomebrewCon, but yeah, he was in fine fettle then.
Yeah, he is one fine fettle kind of guy. Yeah, and mainly because he's super smart and a great engineer, and he transmits those values down to the rest of the folks that he hires and he works with, and the products that they produce. I am truly impressed with all the innovations that they do, and the quality of the products that they build are always just outstanding. I'm just amazed. He's invented things like the beer gun and so many other things that just have innovated your brew day. I'm always really impressed. I think it's if you're looking at buying some equipment or buying or looking for a small professional brewery, or even if you're looking for something on more budget friendly like the Anvil products. They got a full range of everything from the highest end, from the pro to the pro amateur to the more cost conscious amateur. They got it all. Check it out, BlickmanEngineering.com.
They really stand behind everything they make.
Oh, absolutely. John Blickman's that way. He wouldn't. If something's wrong, he's on it.
I just, gave away at the last HomebrewCon our brew system that was handed down from you to the Brewing Network, and we gave it to a Brewing Network listener.
Oh, yeah?
And
you just want to get that shit out of your house?
it was time to just move it along, to someone who's going to use it.
It's time to pull the old rugs and shit that were piled on top of it, yeah.
But I struggled to also give away my Therminator, my Blickman Therminator with it.
Yeah.
Because it's still like shiny and new and it works so great. And I'm like, well, I'm going to brew again someday.
No, you aren't.
And
Just face the reality.
But it's such a good product that I just was like, they can buy a chiller. I'm giving them the whole system. I really wanted to keep my Blickman Therminator. But I didn't. I gave it to them too. Good products is what I'm saying.
I hear you. Yeah.
It's such a good chiller. Like, I know that if I brew again, I'm just going to buy that again. So I felt like, I just don't want to give it away, but I did.
You're not going to brew again. That's just the reality.
Well, that was part of my reasoning why I did in the end. Not just because I could part with my Blickman products, but because I won't use them.
Right. Clear all that crap out of your house. You're not going to use it.
I still have your, I didn't give away your conical, though. I do have your conical if you want that back. You asked me for it a while ago, and I was like, no, I'm using it. But
did I?
Yeah.
What size is it?
It's the big one.
The 28?
Maybe. It's big.
Just ship it out to the same person that won the...
No. I'll raffle that separately if we're giving it away.
Sure. I don't think I have a use for it at the brewery.
Okay. That person ended up being a pro, like turning pro anyway. So I was kind of like, in the end, I was like, well, I didn't really want this to go to a pro brewery.
That's a little dickish. It needs to go to somebody who.
It's like
homebrewing.
That's what I thought. But at that point, I didn't like put in a bunch of rules, I just was like, we're raffling off to a homebrewer, to a listener.
You're just glad you're getting it out of your...
No, I was glad to give it to a listener. I felt like, I wasn't just going to sell it. You know what I mean? It needs to go, like it needs to stay in the family, I felt like.
A lot of award-winning beer been brewed on that.
Yeah.
Not when you brewed on it, but when I brewed on it.
Right. Yeah. It needs to be brought back to its former glory. Is what I felt. You know,
somebody should be cranking out on that thing if he. If he's using it.
I cranked out on it a couple times. If that's what you mean.
Yeah.
I saw those stains.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's if he's using it as like a pilot system at his brewery or something.
Well,
like
that's
that,
I don't know. I didn't want to pry too much because I felt bad.
Send me his contact info.
I need to move my old system as well.
You're ready to ready to raffle yours off too?
I'll be.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I'll give him crap. I'll go like, hey.
I give it. Yeah. He needs to hand it down to a listener.
Right.
You know.
Exactly.
If you're a pro, then go to More Beer or Blickman and buy a pilot system.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, we'll see.
He's probably listening, or will listen, and then he's going to be like,
"Hey, why you throw me under the bus?"
Yeah.
What did I do? I didn't do anything.
Well, we told you what you did. All right. Anyway,
we get angry at people for no
apparent
logical
reason. Yeah,
yes.
That's pretty much how we work.
Yeah. This is the Brewing Network. You've listened before, haven't you?
Yeah, you can do like real things, and we're not mad about that.
Right.
It's stuff like this that bothers
it's the stuff
us.
we imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like my wife. She imagines I did something, and then she's upset.
Makes sense. All right.
All right. Yeah. Well, wow. This was totally unexpected.
Threw you for a curve.
The system has moved on.
My Blickman Terminator and the More Beer system.
Yes. It has moved on.
I mean, it's still at More Beer right now because they're getting it like back in tip-top shape before sending it. So we could still derail the delivery.
They're getting the couple of stains off of it.
Although I gave it away in June, so it's been derailed by me already, clearly. It's still in California. And I still have to give my Terminator because I brought it thinking I'm not giving away my Terminator. But I have since decided I will, and so now I have to go bring that last piece also.
Where is the winner located?
New Jersey.
Oh, Jesus Christ. You ship it across the country.
I got to pay shipping because I didn't put that in the fine print.
That's going to be $1,000 to get
Yeah,
it
so the whole
the
thing didn't make any money for the Brewing Network, basically, once you count all that.
Right. Huh.
Luckily, the More Beer guys are nice, and they're just doing, they're just going to refurb it however it needs to be done.
Right.
I'm like, charge me for stuff, and they're like, no, don't worry. But it's still in Concord, basically. Maybe we should drive it. Maybe we should strap it to the top of the RV, Jamil.
There you go.
Drive it out
This
ourselves.
is sounding good.
To New Jersey.
I like this.
In the winter. It's coming up.
Maybe we get it out to Nashville, and he meets us in Nashville for the homebrew
So
conference.
I am going to drive to Nashville. I'm
There you
driving
go.
to that.
Have him meet you in Nashville.
He's already been uptight about it taking this long.
Oh.
So,
Well.
I can't hear you, Bebo. Sorry, Bebo.
Justifiably, though.
Yeah, it's been a while,
Has he ever listened to the Brewing Network before?
And I wanted to say that.
Why would you expect
You have
to
a
go
point.
quickly? Why would you expect us not to talk about this and imagine something negative?
Out of the whole thing. He's probably the nicest person on the planet.
Right. I would say drive it to Nashville.
Yeah.
And then you could always ship it from Nashville to New Jersey.
He can ship it to New Jersey.
Right. And it's just very, very much cheaper.
Well, then we
should
can
always
now
put a caveat on every
I
raffle
know,
prize.
I know,
It's
and I
like,
didn't do that.
pick it up at the homebrew conference.
Right. Well, I should have. The problem, was that the last one was in Providence, so that's why I was like, I'm not
driving to Providence.
Yeah.
Nashville, sure.
And so now I get Palmer. Maybe we'll throw yours in the same trailer, and we'll,
There you go.
if you got to give yours away too.
Yeah, we loaded up.
I'm running out of room in the shop.
There we go.
That, or you just pay the $1,000 to ship it. It's going to be.
That's what's going to happen. More Beer's probably going to get me a discount because they ship a bunch of stuff, and then I'll just give them that in advertise. It's all going to come out in the wash, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's the thing to do.
Yeah.
Send them the damn thing.
Yeah.
Throw the Terminator in there.
That's what started all this. I'm giving him my Terminator and I'm sad. I'm sad about that. I really like my Blickman Terminator.
There you go. Well, that's the show. That's all we had time for. Hope you enjoyed it.
Speaking of the show.
Oh, speaking of the show, we got a good one for you today and tomorrow and going on. We're going to talk about the practical aspects of barrel aging. I mean, everything from recipe to selecting barrels to maintaining barrels, moving barrels, everything from the talk that we're going to cover was designed for pro brewers, but there's a lot of applicable material to homebrewers or homebrew clubs as well.
Yeah.
Because it's barrel aging. There's really pro or amateur. It's just probably the number of barrels that you're willing to do.
Yeah. In fact, we're going to do 2, maybe even 3 shows on this. So as soon as you hear this particular show, send in your questions and we can address them on the second and third shows.
If you're listening live.
Regarding barrel agings, yes.
Yes.
Right.
And I think we may sneak in a Jay-Z's medical corner at some point. There's been a lot of questions.
Lots of experiments.
I am still alive.
There's definitely more questions than answers. Nobody really knows what's wrong with you.
My testicles are generally the same size now. All those things. We'll answer those coming up in a Jay-Z's medical corner, so stand by for that. All right. Do you want to take a short break and we'll get back to barrel aging? We're going to talk first about the objectives of barrel aging right after this. Barrel aging, everything to do about barrel aging, from soup to nuts, from A to Z, from the head
beginning to end,
from the beginning to the end. I never thought of that one. That is
from head to bung.
Ah, there you go. That's what you were trying to think of.
From head to bung. Yes, from the heads to the bungs. First off, like we like to do, I kind of like to define what we're talking about, and in this case, the objectives of barrel aging. The true purpose of barrel aging is to develop certain flavors and aromas in your beer that are reminiscent of barrel aging, give the beer a character, wood or other characters that elevate the beer to another level, integrate well with the beer, make the beer taste better or special. So that's kind of the objective of barrel aging. There's another objective, which is for the pro brewer marketing. When you say something's barrel aged, it's exciting for the consumer. They will pay more because, I don't know, they've kind of been trained to pay more for barrel aged beers, or
has a certain cachet to it. Yes.
Exactly. I think so that's kind of an important part of barrel aging for the pro level brewer, or the commercial brewer, and even for the home brewer, saying, hey, this is barrel aged, when you're at a fest or sharing it with friends. I think that can have some zing to it as well. Flavor and aroma development in the barrel is coming from a few things. One is things like bacteria, Brettanomyces. The bacteria will consume some of the available sugars, and will produce acids and flavors that will change the flavor and aroma of the beer. Same thing with Brettanomyces. That can consume longer chain sugars, starches. It can even consume some of the wood starches, and develop flavors, a unique set of flavors, and dry out the beer.
Yeah, Jamil, I'm going to stop you right there.
Yeah.
Would you say that there are 3, maybe 4 classes of barrel-aged beers? I'm hearing there's, strictly wood-aged, then maybe a sour beer, and then or maybe or a Brett beer, and then maybe a combination of Brett and sour. Would you say that's accurate, or would you divvy them up a little bit differently?
Right. Well, and I think even with the sour and the Brett, and the combination of those, you will get some wood character as well. I mean, it depends how long it's resident in the barrel, what kind of barrel. But
it's possible to get a wood only barrel age without any Brett or without any sour as well.
Absolutely. So I would maybe, I think you're right. I would, divvy it up maybe into 2 at least, where you're saying there's the clean barrel aged, with where you're getting wood character, and you also get character of what was resident in the barrel before, and then there's the one with Brett or bacteria with live organisms producing some other flavors. So I generally think of them as those 2,
okay,
and that's how we separate them in our brewery. But I'm intrigued by your thoughts on, maybe there's a finer definition there. The other thing that happens when you put beer in barrels is, since it is not an oxygen-proof storage vessel like a stainless vessel, you get some oxidative related compounds occurring, and the longer it's in there, the type of wood that you're using, that can affect that. And you'll always get staling compounds. For a beer that's stored, staling compounds are just something that happens over time. So if you just keep a beer for a year in a can, or in a stainless container, at room temperature for a year, you're going to pick up some staling compounds in that, and that can be a good thing in certain types of beers. And it can be a bad thing. It depends on what you're trying to develop. But that also is part of the flavor and aroma development that occurs in barrels. And then, of course, like John was saying, you're going to get that barrel wood flavor transfer. You're getting a transfer of what was in the barrel before, or if you're doing a new barrel, you're going to get, more wood. But generally, those are the things that you're looking at for flavor and aroma development. Bacteria and Brett, oxidative and staling, and then you get the transfer of the wood or what was in the barrel, or both.
Yeah. Yeah, I've met a lot of homebrewers that are buying small new barrels, not previously used wine barrels
Right.
because they don't have 50 gallons of beer to throw in there, but often the smaller barrels, and yeah, they're often wondering how to use them and what characters to get and how long to put it in there.
Right.
So I wanted to bring up kind of that wood only category
Sure.
for the new barrels.
Well, and we'll get into that. It's just those small barrels when they're new, man, there's a lot of oak that comes across, or whatever the wood is that really comes across in a bold way, and you have to be very careful of how to kind of deal with that and not make a tannic mess.
Yeah, yeah.
One thing I want to mention about the marketing, you know, you can enhance your marketing with, of a beer, by mentioning the type of barrel, where the barrel came from, and the process that you use. So, for example, I will make, our sour beer agony at Heretic, and I will say, these are Napa Valley wine barrels. This is, or for our beer Hawaii, it's Napa Valley Chardonnay barrels, and we age it for 2 years in the barrel, et cetera, et cetera. Or we use the Brettanomyces that we harvested that's unique to our valley. We put that in. So all those things, when you're talking about barrel aged beer and you're trying to come up with a sell sheet or something like that, you need to talk about the barrel, because that's the thing that people are keying on. It's not like, well, I use crystal malt in this. It's like, no. Tell them more about the barrel, and that will help you sell more barrel aged beer, make it more special. The more things you can mention.
Yeah, that's incredibly important, I think.
Right. Well, the longer I do this, commercial beer thing, the more I, kind of get into.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even just me as a consumer, I mean, literally thousands of beers on the shelves. And yeah, I'm looking for what beer is going to capture my attention, offer some story that I can potentially, drink into or buy into.
Right.
What's going to make this beer more interesting than that beer? So yeah, I want to know those stories.
Yeah. Well, there's so many barrels available from brokers nowadays. I think there's a lot of possibilities there. Possible beer styles. That's the other thing. I think that you're not limited to one type of beer. When a lot of this started a couple of decades ago, it was pretty much taking a stout and putting it in a whiskey or bourbon barrel, and that was it. And that just blew everybody's minds, and that was great. But I think that today, with the creativity that's going on, the styles are limitless. It's no longer that. The traditional stuff is big stouts, dark beers in whiskey barrels, bourbon barrels, and sour beer in wine barrels. That's kind of traditional. That's what's been going on. It's a great thing to do. I mean, that's what we do at Heretic. We do all those, but we do some special stuff, and there's a more modern take on it. Our good friend in
John Blickman?
no, used to be.
Oh.
God, my memory is shot with these drugs. At Fate.
Fate.
Or used to be at Fate. Oh my God.
His name?
Nope.
No. Arta? Okay. Jeff.
Jeff, yes, thank you. Jeff Griffith, right, at Fate, or used to be at Fate. Fantastic brewer. One of the things that he and I worked on when it's when you and I drove out in the RV, or no, we drove out with what what's her name?
Daniela?
Daniela.
Mm-hmm.
Out to GABF, and we stop at the brewery in Colorado, and Jeff was there.
In Golden, Colorado.
Golden, right,
yeah.
Right. And we were working on Goza before that via email and stuff, and Jeff is he's just the most wonderful person. He, has perfected Goza, if you ask me, and he did a Goza in tequila barrels while he was at Fate, and it was just spectacular. I thought that was a perfect beer. Good combination of the tequila flavor, kind of the little bit of acidity and a little bit of a very minor amount of salt, and in the Goza, a brilliant adaptation of modern styles and barrel aging. People do things like lagers in new oak. They'll do IPA and wine barrels. I mean, you could do almost anything you want. The key is you got to have the right beer for the right barrel. You're talking about combining flavors.
Yeah, vision and balance.
Mm-hmm. And you have to think about any staling or oxidative characteristics that you're going to get that may affect the beer and change the beer to a point where it's not good. If you take a certain beers and then you add this kind of staling character to them, some work. Like a lot of the staling can be this kind of overtly sweet caramel kind of character, and if you add that to something that's a roasty stout, that can be nice. You add that to a light lager, it just tastes stale.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of be careful about that.
Yeah, I think that's a very important consideration. Smell the barrel, understand what was in it before, and think about the characters that kind of wood and that type, what that barrel was previously used for, what those will contribute to the beer. There's one recommendation out there is to, tweak your recipe and, back off on some of the roast bitterness to compensate for roast character that may come from the barrel, or or if you're looking to get in a malt forward beer, if you're looking to get some of those interesting oxidative flavors, then give that recipe some additional residual dextrins for that to work on. Well, likewise, if you're souring it.
And that's an excellent point. I think you need to take into account, how the barrel is, produced, even if you're doing a new barrel, or even more so if you're doing a new barrel. So you can do barrels that have a light toast. You can do ones that have a heavy toast, medium toast, any range. And then when you're talking about whiskey barrels and stuff, they get charred. It's actual charcoal that gets produced, which produces a lot of those roasty flavors. So you got to take that all into account. All right, let's do this. Let's take another break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about flavor development right after this.
This is Brew Strong.
It was almost identical. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I could just fill in if the board ever breaks or something. I can just jump right in there.
Done.
Yeah, so we're talking about the flavor and flavor development in the barrels, and why you are barrel aging and all that. And for flavor development, like we said, there's basically those three basic vectors: the barrel and wood flavor transfer, oxidative and staling compounds, and then bacteria and Brettanomyces activity. That's pretty much it. Your barrel flavor transfer, when I talk about barrel flavor, I'm talking about the compounds in the barrel that were previously resident before you put in the beer. So like a whiskey barrel, you transfer your beer in there, immediately you're going to get some of that whiskey flavor from that. If it's a red wine barrel and you put in a really pale beer, you're going to pick up some of that color, and you're going to transfer some of that flavor. So that's the fastest transfer of, or fastest flavoring that's going to happen. It's going to be your bourbon, your wine, your tequila, rum, whatever was in that barrel. That's going to come first, and then you're going to get the wood flavor transfer. And right now we're talking mainly about this occurs in clean wood-only beers, like John was talking about, and also in the sour Brettanomyces beers. And there's three categories, John. There's the wood only, and then there's the clean other, or the non-sour other compounds like Brettanomyces that don't necessarily sour, and then there's the sour ones, which can have Brettanomyces, generally do, but also have bacteria that's sour. So maybe three categories.
Okay.
Would you say?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. See, here, listen to us here defining things for the interwebs. The wood flavor transfer. Now it's going to take much longer than the beer flavor transfer, or the barrel flavor transfer that was there previously. These are compounds like vanilla, caramel, spicy compounds, tobacco sometimes, anything oaky, woody compounds. All those are from your wood flavor transfer. Those can take, in a new barrel, a small new barrel, that can happen in a week or two, to a used bourbon barrel that's been 10 years aging bourbon. To get more wood flavor out of that can sometimes take, you can get some at about 2-3 months, but generally, closer to a year, you start to develop some of those wood flavors more. Oxidation and age. The staling and the oxidation. Staling's really independent of the barrel in a way. We're talking to heat and age staling. Temperature is more of a factor, and the duration, the amount of time that you're letting it sit, is more of a factor than the fact that you put it in a barrel. The barrel will affect more oxygen staling, oxidative staling compounds.
Okay.
And that's dependent on how thick the staves are, what the oak is, what kind of tree it came from. French oak tends to pass more oxygen. American oak tends to be a denser, harder wood, and let less oxygen in. The size of the vessel, those giant foeders that you see, one of the reasons that they use something that large is your surface area to beer ratio, you're getting less oxidative staling. When you get down, the smaller the vessel, the more oxidative staling you're going to get. So that's one of the things to keep in mind. One of the purposes.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that American wood harder than the French. I think that's important.
Much harder wood.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I've experienced, and I've been to France a couple of times, and I just think we have harder.
Yeah.
Very, very much like a strong oak limb here. Those oxidation and staling compounds can give you some rich malt flavors, or things that people tend to think of as rich and malty. It is a staling compound. There's that kind of caramel, that sweet caramel I keep talking about. There is, some things that people say, oh, that's malty. It's actually staling compounds that can go well in a beer. One of the other and the most important things about oxygen in these things is, the development of fruity compounds. So sometimes, like, you're barrel aging a English barley wine. It's got this rich, licorice and these other compounds and malty, and what you're looking for, what a lot of people are looking for, is kind of vinous fruitiness that occurs over time. And one of the ways that happens is the some of the higher alcohols, along with some acids, exactly, produce some of those esters, and that's part of what you're looking for in one of these. The oxygen plays a role in it as well. You can develop more of these fruity esters over time. So that's another one that time and condition will enhance or detract from those fruity ester development.
I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I think it may be a good idea to just mention here that forced aging to try to develop these characters faster, not a good idea, correct?
I agree with you 100%. Anything good takes time, it seems.
Yeah.
I've never found a good shortcut to good barrel aging. And that even includes, trying to do small barrels because it's faster. Mm-hmm. You're going to get, some of that oak faster, but and I guess if you did that and then transferred it to a carboy, maybe, and maybe you could do it. I don't know. It's just an issue with that, I think.
Yeah. Well, I've heard this from several brewers. Julian Schrago from Beechwood,
mm-hmm.
Jen Talley, from Auburn. She says, make sure you give the beer in the barrel sufficient time, at least 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will, be tasting the beer along the way, and they say, wow, it's got so much oak character, I need to pull it now before it gets any more. But she argues that, in fact, if you give it more time, you'll go through a transition where a lot of that tannin will start to settle out, and the beer will actually mellow in the barrel over the course of a year.
Right, I agree. One of the things that when I was doing this on a commercial scale, I think we were worried that going past a couple of months, 2-3 months, it was going to get too oaky, and there was going to be a problem with the beer, or maybe it would get sour or whatever. And so we were initially doing 2-3 months on some of our bourbon barrel aged beers, our wood only beers. And then I don't know what made me do it, but I pushed past that, and we started going to a year to 2 years. And an interesting thing happens, like you're saying. I'm not sure that the tannins are really dropping out, or you're developing more of that rich kind of malty character, or you're pulling other compounds from the wood that have a lot of that vanilla and caramel, and those are kind of balancing out the tannins. It's hard to say exactly what's happening there, but it's caused me to go much further, much longer in our wood barrel aged program than I did before.
Yeah.
Time can do a lot of interesting things. So one of the things that we do, and we'll get into this later, is I always keep some unbarreled beer in stainless, so that when I get that beer, from the barrel. Sometimes the flavors are a bit too intense, and something's overriding. You got an overriding flavor, and if you add back a little bit of unbarreled beer, it's almost like adding a little bit of water to whiskey. It opens up and it blooms, and you get all these different flavors coming out all of a sudden. It's the same thing. You add a little bit of unbarreled beer, and it develops. It lets those compounds, those flavors, work on their own stage a little bit, and you get far more flavors out of it. So that's one of the tricks that we'll talk about later. Let's see. Bacteria. So the bacteria that you would use if you're doing a sour beer is obviously souring, which is development of acids to lower the pH, and it also dries out the beer a little bit, through the further consumption of sugars that are available. The Brettanomyces will do a similar thing. It's also going to dry out the beer, but it will go much further. It will consume a lot of the longer chain starches. It will even consume some of the wood of the barrel. And the interesting thing about Brettanomyces, and possibly any yeast, Brettanomyces, it just keeps going, whereas you add some other yeast, they will die off and just kind of go inert and stop. But Brettanomyces keeps chugging along and finds something to do. And that's one of the reasons that people will use Brettanomyces in barrel-aged projects. One of the things is any yeast, and Brettanomyces in particular in barrel aging, it will clean up a lot of the oxidative staling. One of the first things that happens in the consumption of breaking down of the sugars and all that for the yeast to consume this food is to use oxygen as part of that process. And if the one of the things that happens is you can take a stale beer and you can add Brett to it. And I've had a stale beer. So we make a beer called Worry. It's a Belgian golden, and it's very light color. And we put in these Chardonnay barrels. And I don't know what happened, but we're on this one batch we were doing. Somebody somehow missed adding the Brett to 2 barrels, and the beer was dark brown. Look at how brown. The others were all bright and clear. I told my guys, I'm like, well, just add the Brett to it now. They're like, well, no, we need to dump these. They're all brown and stale and yucky. And I'm like, no, just add the Brett. It'll clean it up. And they're like, no, that doesn't work. Like, yes, it'll work. Dr. Lewis at UC Davis had talked about this before. But you add the Brett to those, and within a month, 2 months, they were bright and clear and tasted the same as the other ones.
Yeah,
So,
it's interesting how they'll do that.
Yeah,
I had a Belgian double that was phenolic, and added Brett and souring to it, and it ate up the phenolics, cleaned it right up. It was really a lovely sour after that.
Yeah, Brett is amazing. The phenols are used as a substrate for some of those, barnyard classic, what people think of as Brett. The phenols are a necessary substrate for the development of those flavors. So that's another great thing about Brett. Brett's pretty amazing in what it can do. It's one of my favorite yeasts. I don't know. And let's see. And then, time. Flavor development, like John was saying, takes time. There is no set time. It could be from a few days to a few years. I generally think anything past a few years, although, now I say that, I have a beer that is it's coming up on 4 or 5 years now. And generally you can't, but there are, I guess, exceptions when you can. All right. Let's take another short break, and when we come back, we will wrap up with a little bit about recipe design right after this.
never been so disgusting. This is Brew Strong.
All right, back. One of the things that's important, like John was alluding to, was the recipe design, how you develop your beer recipe to go with what you were trying to achieve in the barrel and to match the barrel flavoring. One of the most common things I get asked is, your sour recipe design. How do you, what people are most of the time think, well, I'll just brew, a brown ale or a porter or imperial stout, and I'll throw that into, a bourbon barrel, and that's what I'm done. Souring, becomes a whole different kind of animal. One of the things to know about developing sour beers is that alcohol and bitterness are the enemy of the souring process. It hurts the bacteria and the yeast. They, high IBU will negatively impact the yeast. So you really want to go, a few IBUs at most. Sometimes we'll throw in a token amount of hops in order to, we're targeting maybe 5 IBU, 6 IBU, and no more than that. And we won't go high ABV. Generally, I'll target around 6% ABV. One, because that's a more marketable ABV. But you can go lower than that. Going higher than that is really starts to get a little bit more problematic. I wouldn't go much past the 6%.
Yeah, I can't think of any high gravity sours that, except maybe one of Russian Rivers or so that.
Yeah, Consecration is up there. I mean, we've done some. I've got a beer that's 15% sitting in a barrel with some souring, and it really does not sour much at that point. It's pretty proof against souring.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When you get to 10% plus, it becomes tricky. We've soured a Belgian strong, but even then, the souring becomes subtle when you're past 10%.
Okay.
Just becomes one of those things. I think Consecration is 10% as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And they're actually getting it quite sour now. The most recent samples I've had have been a lot of. If you use Brett in conjunction, you can sometimes get more souring. It'll break down some of those compounds.
Right. Okay.
But the takeaway is that alcohol and bitterness are really the enemy of souring, and you need your proper process. It takes time. Generally, souring in the barrel on something like this, we give it a minimum of a year. We do barrels 1, 2, and 3 years old. Past that, it tends to be a problem. You start getting more rougher souring and a little more harshness. And so we generally limit ourselves to 3 years, but we don't tend to harvest anything less than a year. A lot of times it'll be, 16 months, 18 months, and then we'll blend that with, 2.5 year, maybe up to 3 year, depending on flavor. You generally need a lower temperature. There's a kind of a rule that you'll see talked about from Belgian brewers that it's 20C. You don't want to exceed 20C, which is 68 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
The hotter temperatures will result in harsher flavors. So you need to find kind of a cool place to do it. I believe in less oxygen is better. You need some, but I tend to prefer the American oak barrels, the tighter grain, harder barrels. They have some French ones that are tighter grain as well. if you're doing something on the commercial scale, a blend of them. I don't worry too much about getting French barrels or American oak barrels, because you tend to get a blend of them from Napa wineries, because they will blend some of those flavors as well. And what I'll do is, we'll just brew 90 barrels or 120 barrels of wort and fill those barrels. And then as they develop, we're like, well, a little bit more oxygen in this one was nice, and the French one, we'll blend it with this American one. We'll kind of pick and choose, the flavors that we like. So having a few of each kind can be beneficial in that aspect. Or you can go to a larger vessel where the surface area ratio is a little bit better, where
like a foeder?
Like a foeder, yeah. And you're getting, or you can do, even larger puncheons, larger barrels, and that could possibly, be of
That'll
benefit.
have a different character than the smaller barrel. Yeah.
Less oxygen.
Yeah.
And again, like John was mentioning earlier, you need those, certain compounds, those substrates for this flavor development. If you're doing just a clean lactic souring, simple sugars will speed that along. Be aware that a lot of these these bacterias have a bottom pH that they will go to. So a lot of them will zero out at their activity in the low 3s. Some of them will go to like maybe 2.8, but they all have some limit to how much acid they'll produce and what kind of environment they'll continue to function in. In that case, you can start with, if you want something more sour, you can start with your bacteria and then add Brett later, which will dry out the beer a bit more. Every yeast produces acid in its process and will change the acidity as well. So you can get it really low if you want it really sour. I don't tend to like those, but some people do. And also, if you're going to be adding Brett in your sour beer design, some phenols, if you want to get those, barnyard type compounds, those rustic things, those horse blanket things that they say. It's depending on an array of phenols which you can produce through using a phenol positive yeast in your initial ferment. So like a 530, 550, 540, all White Labs. I just know the White Labs numbers. I'm sorry, but a Belgian yeast that is phenol positive. You ferment that in your stainless or your glass carboy or whatever first. You let that yeast settle out. You transfer it to the barrel, and then you add your lactic acid and your Brett, or you can add it in the stainless or whatever. And the most important thing is, as you see these beers develop in the barrels, you need to taste on a regular basis, see how they're developing, give them time, and then you can
what kind of interval do you recommend?
Blend as well. It depends. A lot of these, when we first started, I was tasting them like monthly. A lot of them, we don't really taste them for 6 months now, 6 months to a year. And then we start tasting them. There's a lot, a lot more tasting as we get ready to blend and package something. We will, go through all the barrels that we think we'll need, and until we find the right numbers of them, and we'll taste them all and go, okay, this one's in, this one's out. We'll find barrels that we need to dump. Always count on the fact that you're going to need to dump some of those barrels. Okay. And then some that just need more time, and then you'll find your selection that need a blend. It takes a lot of time. If you've got a lot of barrels, there's a lot of tasting to be done there. But one of the things, and I think John talked about this before, is there's no shortcuts. You can't raise the temperature and make it go faster. You can, but it's not going to taste good. You can't introduce more oxygen. You can't, just pour in acid. All these things, you just end up with an unpleasant sour beer.
You can't do faster, better, cheaper with sour beers.
Yeah, and
you can only do better.
And that's one of the reasons that consumers will still pay a premium for a beer that sat in a barrel for 2-3 years, and was blended and tasted, and there was barrels that got dumped, and there's fruit and all this stuff. Ends up quite expensive to make. Unfortunately, I want to say we'll throw out there that there's a large amount of less educated consumers than listen to Brew Strong, that sour beer is a sour beer. So you make a kettle sour and it tastes sour. They're not too aware of the difference in why the barrel aged sour is much more expensive than the kettle sour. So you kind of run into that, trying to go back to that marketing thing.
Right.
So it's important to kind of explain the reason why, the difference why. All right. I think that was a good show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what we'll do in the next show is we'll start talking about we'll start out with more recipe design. We'll talk about malty beers and how you do those.
Great.
Yes.
Sounds good.
I have an important question for the two of you.
Sure.
At your age,
Yes.
do you still manscape?
Well, that would be a absolute positive. Yes.
I like to hear this. Well, have you tried manscaped.com?
I have not.
They apparently have trimmers that will not cut your junk.
Really?
Wow.
They're anti-junk cutting trimmers.
Wow.
That would be a very positive thing.
Right. So
It's called the Lawnmower 2.0. This is not a joke. And they sent me some samples.
Nice.
I haven't used it yet.
right.
I'm due.
Yeah, I would imagine there would be like fur hanging out of that box. If,
Yeah, so it won't cut your junk.
even if one is the size of an avocado and the other is like a walnut.
I think that's right. I think it doesn't.
All go over that terrain.
I think size
Even if
does
one
not.
looks like Thanos.
What if I've got a particularly large vein popping out on one?
This thing says it won't happen. So go to manscaped.com and use coupon code BREWING, and you're going to get like 20% off or something.
Excellent.
Let me
That is interesting. I'm waiting for you
verify
to
that. Yeah, 20% off plus free shipping with coupon code BREWING.
for you to mow your lawn, and then
I'll report back.
Report back.
You want me to take a video of it?
No. Just any blood loss.
Right.
Yeah.
They also have a product, an anti-chafing ball deodorant called Crop Preserver.
Nice. I could always use an anti-chafing.
Yeah, that I feel like everybody
ball
needs.
deodorant.
Yeah.
Keep them smelling fresh.
Your balls will thank you.
When I go to the doctor and say, this one's the size of an avocado.
Yeah, but he'll go, but you know what? It's very well trimmed.
It's very well trimmed and smells
delightful. Manscaped.com. Use coupon code BREWING.
Brewing. All right.
So.
Okay. Great show. Thanks to our excellent sponsor, Blickman Engineering. Check out that manscaped.com. It sounds like fun.
Yep.
Everybody needs a nice, clean, well-deodorized area.
That's right.
It's summer months. I appreciate a little less bushes down there.
A little freshness.
A little freshness, a little less hair. Everybody's happy. And that's what we provide around here. Happiness.
That's right.
Happiness and bring information. That's the
Exactly.
All right. If you're listening live, stay tuned for the next show. We're going to continue on with all the barrel do's and don'ts. And if you're not, the next show will be posted in a couple of weeks. Enjoy. Until then, everybody, brew strong.
Brew strong, everyone.
Doc in forever. I was just thinking about
yeah.
that the other day. I was thinking about how I haven't seen Doc in such a long time, and I'm
I just walked in the studio.
That's awesome.
Why is that not working?
because this is right now.
Should be working.
Should it? Is it?
It's not.
Try another one?
Try that one.
It's snot.
Hey, is that better?
That's better.
That's much better.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, that was weird. Gotta fix that.
There you go.
Sure you. Yeah.
We get right on that.
Hi, Doc.
Yeah, how you doing, brother?
Good, good. Hanging in there. Just turned 60. Had my 60th birthday.
Wow.
Oh, damn. Have we known each other that long?
Yep.
Since we were, what, 8?
Yeah, something like
7 or 8? Yeah, yeah. I was 8. You were 10 at the time. I think that's the first time I got arrested, hanging out with Doc.
Oh, yeah.
It's the first time we all got arrested.
First time I got blackout drunk.
Yeah.
8 years old with Doc.
How was your 60th birthday party? Was it as rough as your 50th?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Glad I missed that.
I was kind of started Friday night, a big party, and then we had the party at Rare Barrel. Alex let us use Rare Barrel. So
Nice.
Oh, wow.
we had a lot of people there. Shimon was singing on the guitar.
Okay.
That went really well. Paxton did the catering. We had a really nice taco bar from Sean Paxton.
Wow.
Wow.
Cool.
Then back to my house for the craziness. Lots of people there.
Right.
That went on into the wee hours. Got a little sleep. Then people woke me up at about noon. Shoe Light woke me up with a few other people for mimosas at noon
Nice.
and started that all in again.
Wow.
Then it kept going until like Monday afternoon.
You'd think you'd turn 21.
I know. It's a big old celebration or something.
Good job. Good on you. Well, you look all right. You don't look like you're dying, so that's good.
No. Well, I spent a week here with Mike in Maui the week before.
Oh, that'll
Nice birthday present. Thank you, man.
that'll tune you up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good tan, the
Yeah.
color in my face.
Get your winter tan.
Yeah. Yeah, my winter tan.
Yeah. Wow. Living the dream, Doc. Still living the dream.
Of course. All right. Well, we got to get back, so
All right. Go back to work. We'll do the same.
I got to do it.
It's good to see you.
All right, you too.
Take it
See you
easy.
later.
Bye,
See you,
Norte. All right.
Oh, we still need to do that lager collab, Doc.
Oh, yeah.
You guys got a collab brew going?
Oh, we should.
No, we talked about it when I first set up the Heretic. We still haven't done it.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
I've done all sorts of other collabs and never done it with my friends. I do it with my friends, but
Can it be a Dortmunder?
yeah, we could do
Doc makes a
anything.
good Dortmunder.
Yeah, let's do that.
No,
Oh,
we
yeah,
wanted
that would be
wanted to
good.
do some sort of lager.
Yeah, let's definitely do that. Let's chat, and we'll get that on the books. Let's get it done.
I got a couple more tanks coming in.
Ooh.
Make a
maybe it'll be
Docmunder.
possible.
A Docmunder.
Yeah.
Ooh, that
See?
sounds good. We've already got branding.
Yep. I'm here to help.
All right, yeah, let's get in touch and let's figure out when and what and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
All right.
All right, see ya.
See you, brother. Yeah. Another good friend. Another good friend of the Brewing Network.
Mm-hmm.
Good friend of the show.
Speaking of lagers, your lagers did very well at my Concord Oktoberfest event.
Oh, there you go.
Your Oktoberfest was the first to kick. People really enjoyed that. And then I had your Hefeweizen, which was probably the second to kick. Yeah, there weren't. I think I only had one other Hef. People don't make Hefs anymore.
Right.
And then your lager, your Helles lager.
Right.
So all were stellar.
There you go. Styles that people really don't want to buy but once a year.
Right. And I was like, you told me what you had. I said, I want 2 of everything.
Yeah.
So
Oh no, it's fun being able to produce those beers. I really love, I'm still, people say, "Oh, do you homebrew?" I'm like, well, I know the question is, at home, are you using a little system to make beer? And generally the answer is no, but I'm still a home brewer at heart. Everything we do is really mentally homebrew related at Heretic. We, are constantly, coming up with new things and crazy things and trying weird things that may not work. We do all those things. We homebrew just on a much larger scale, and we have a license to sell it.
I hear you.
So that's I still love that aspect of the business. I don't like the business aspect of the business, but I really love the creative side and the fixing things around the brewery. I'm fixing things around the brewery all the time, building new things. It's like the Winchester Mystery House of breweries, where it's just like keep building. So we're constantly adding tanks and fixing things and changing things around, because that's what I love to do. I love tinkering with the equipment, and I loved tinkering with the recipes and creating new things. That was always my passion, and that's why I homebrewed, and that's why I still consider myself a homebrewer. I'll be a homebrewer till the day I die. Another person that's like this, that loves tinkering and engineering and creating things and making things better, it's our friend John Blickman.
Yes, the inventor himself.
BlickmanEngineering.com. You'll see their equipment sold by the vast majority of homebrew shops, because it is the best. They have the best engineered, the best produced equipment out there, and they've got everything from the more cost effective or cost conscious anvil brewing equipment to the pro level larger systems. They do everything and the in between, and they're constantly innovating and creating new stuff. And the most important thing, if you're listening to the show, you're listening to the show for free out of the good graces of John Blickman and Blickman Engineering. They take a portion of those profits and they use that to pay for the show, so you don't have to. And they've been doing it for damn near 10 years.
Yep.
I think one of the least things you could do is reach out to them. Send an email to feedback@, BlickmanEngineering.com, and it goes straight to John Blickman, by the way. I made him set that email address up because I said it so much. And you send that, and he gets that email, and just a thank you, just like, hey, thanks for being part of quitting your job as a engineer at Caterpillar, and doing this homebrew thing and changing how homebrew equipment's done and how homebrewing's done, and thanks for sponsoring the show. And a little email. That's all I ask. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to, but check out their website, and email John Blickman and tell him how much you appreciate it. I think that is a small cost for how great we are.
He really does appreciate
Brew
it.
Strong. He does. He loves hearing from people. It makes him feel good. It'll keep him suckered in on paying for the show. I'm just saying. Let's keep that rolling. Let's see how many more years we can do this before he figures it out. We have to find a different sponsor.
Yeah, keep going.
Yep. Speaking of keeping going, we last show had delved into the topic of barrel aging. It's a big topic, so we split that up into multiple shows. And last week, last show we left off at sour beer recipe design, and we had talked about how you would do that to maximize. We talked about the objectives of barrel aging. We talked about possible beer styles that you could use. We talked about how you're getting flavor development, and then we got into the sour recipe. So if you're interested in any of that, go back to the previous show. Today we're going to start off with
Jay-Z's Medical Corner.
You want to do JC's Medical Corner? All right. I will tell you. So, and now for Jay-Z's Medical Corner. So a year ago, this is right now, we're October 23rd today, 2019. A year ago in November, I was in Japan. My legs swelled up just massively, just freakishly, kind of for no reason.
Wow. Otherwise known as edema?
Yeah, I kind of got the swelling to go back down by elevating my legs, and when I got back, the swelling was still there. I got back to the U.S., went to the doctor. Doctor was like, "Oh, put on some compression socks. Stop whining." And I'm like, "No, it's more than that. This is something weird." And she just kept insisting on that. And so I put on compression socks, and it squeezed blood out of my legs.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
like, this is not right.
That's not normal.
No. And so she kept blowing me off. I was just like, I need to see another doctor. If you're not going to do anything, I need to see another doctor. This is actually something serious. So another doctor, he was like, nah, compression socks. I'm like, no. Finally convinced him to run more tests. Finally, they did a CAT scan. They saw these lumps on my lung, my heart, and that's also what was. And I was telling them there's lumps in my leg. They scanned it for blood clots and all that. I'm like, there's lumps in my legs, and it was lumps across the lymph system. So it turns out I had this thing. They had to do a biopsy through my lungs to these things called granulomas to prove that it was sarcoidosis. Well, sarcoidosis is a immune system disorder that they don't know how you get it. They don't have a cure for it because very few people get it. And for most people, it doesn't do anything. So 0.07% of the population actually gets it. Of those, 20%, it actually affects their lung and their heart. The problem is when it affects your lung and your heart, it can kill you. So I started coughing. I started becoming weak. Before they found this, it was 5 months, and I told my wife I'd be dead by 4th of July. It was, I lost 25 pounds, which is good. But then, so it'll kill you. It forms these things on it damages your lungs, your heart.
They're just like cysts that form?
Granulomas. So the thing is, they didn't know if it was lymphoma or, the sarcoid. Luckily, it was sarcoid. And out of those people that actually have something affect them, 80% of them, within 2 years, it kind of burns itself out and it goes away. I may be in that group that it lasts forever. If it lasts forever, then it kills you in 5 to 10 years. Part of the problem is they don't have a cure for it. They just give you massive amounts of steroids. Not the good steroids that build muscle, but the ones that cause muscle wasting, make you fat and cause roid rage. So I've been on steroids for 6 months, and it's shrunk down those granulomas. So my legs went back to normal pretty quick. I stopped coughing pretty quick. So I started feeling really good, about 2-3 months in. And I was telling my wife, I'm going to go diving again. Everything's great. I actually feel like normal for the first time in a long time. And then the shaking started. So the neurologist isn't really sure of why I'm shaking, but I have this whole tremor thing going on, and then my head snaps to the left every once in a while, and it's a
no
whole
girls involved.
Boy, oh boy!
No, it's a whole new thing that
You're
I went to the head of neurology, and what he said was, I don't know. Literally,
Nice.
that's what he said.
Nice.
Doctors are useless.
I don't know.
That's why I never go.
And then he's like, well, I can give you drugs. That's why you go.
Hmm.
And I'm like, oh, all right. So
Last time I went, they wouldn't even give me drugs.
yeah, they're cutting back on the drugs seriously.
So, all those junkies are ruining it for the rest of us.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
So they give me drugs to try and help with that, but the problem is it just makes you forgetful, and I'm having troubles with my short-term memory and a couple other things. But I look at it this way: I'm alive. I'll take that. That's a win right there.
You got that going for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Boy, oh boy.
it's just been a mess. Since last November.
Mm-hmm.
And then all sorts of shit's happened. My sister died unexpectedly, all sorts of crap. It has been a rough year. It has been a rough last 11, 12 months.
Yeah.
But, again, I'm alive.
Right.
What
Still
more are you going to ask for? And we'll see what happens. We're tapering off the steroids now to see if the sarcoid's gone or whether it's going to stay for the rest of my life or whatever it's going to be. If somebody could guarantee me 10 years, I'd take it right now. So we'll see.
Okay.
But,
right.
yeah, that's what's been going on with me, and it just makes it really hard for me to talk or, it just wears you out. All the shaking and all the other shit just kind of grinds you down to, and then, yeah, the freaking steroids. So I had lost 25 pounds, which I was like, hey, at least if I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die looking thin,
You have that open casket after all.
Exactly. Well, I can fit in the casket.
Yeah.
I won't have to get the extra large, and then save my family some bucks. And then they put me on these drugs, and then the shake and all this. I picked up 30 pounds. I'm like, God damn it, can't win.
Right.
And my skin's getting so thin that every time I'm just scraped, I start gushing blood. It's just amazing how thin my skin has become. Also,
Yeah.
the steroids do that. It's meant to shrink tissue, and so it causes muscle wasting. I'm much weaker than ever. It's hard. All the construction things I used to do out in the brewery, it's getting harder to do any of them.
Right.
So.
Well, you can't croak yet because I can't support your family just yet.
There you go.
I've made you that promise. All this work for free that
Right.
will pay off when you die.
I remember that. I'm
So
glad you remember
I need
that.
a little more time.
Right. I'm thinking.
Your kids are out of college, I hope.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
thinking though they support themselves now.
The bills
so
are going down. Okay. So it's got Liz to worry about.
I think. Yeah. Right. Emotional support. Yeah. There you go.
I'm good at that, I guess.
Yep. Well, we are here for you.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
That's good to get that out there. Get that.
I don't even know what to tell people. Yeah, he's better at because I'm like, I don't know. He has some rare condition that only exists in a weird country, island, somewhere else. I never know what to describe it as. So I'm glad you got that out.
Sarcoidosis was the first one, and then they have no idea what the other one is. But it's probably something. I got all sorts of shit going on, and so they whatever.
Okay,
it's fine. I don't mind sharing with people.
All right.
Whatever. And plus, it makes it less weird. When I'm standing there and all of a sudden I look left. You know what's going on.
Yeah, okay.
My cat does that a lot.
There you go. Well, maybe your cat and I have the same thing, John.
Liz mentioned that to me, but I didn't understand her. When you went up on stage for your presentation at GABF, she's like, I have to sit on his left. It's a thing for him. And I was like, what thing for him?
Oh, I guess maybe she was thinking if my head jerks left,
well, right.
it won't look so weird.
That's what I'm thinking. But
it's like
the way she said it, I was like, what? He now has some weird phobia about... Because she didn't really elaborate.
Well, but then it makes it look like I'm, just looking at her really quick, like, what the hell did you do?
Right. Yeah.
But if I looked away and, like I heard some noise or something and whatever.
You could just shout, cookie, never toss you something.
Pineapple!
Yeah. It's got weird Tourette's.
Yeah. So,
fruit Tourette's.
Right. I got some sort of Tourette's. I was kind of hoping for Tourette's.
Yeah, that would be at least entertaining.
It could still possibly be some form of Tourette's. There's Tourette's where you have a muscle spasm too.
Yeah.
And I just use the Tourette's excuse when I yell at some of the employees. I'm like, it was Tourette's.
I like it.
So there you go.
Yeah. All right.
Barrel aging. We were gonna talk about malty beer recipe design next. I think you can kind of break it down into you want to do the sours, you want to do the malties or the cleans. You can do malty and sour, but just in general, when you're doing something that is non-sour, it's kind of a lot of the opposites. Alcohol and bitterness do help protect the beer from souring. Those alcohols will provide compounds for more flavor development. We talked about fruitiness and things like that. Sometimes the higher alcohols. It's one of the reasons that people tend to put these high ABV stouts in barrels for aging, is because the high ABV means that you might have a higher ratio of these higher alcohols that are going to esterify and develop some of those fruity flavors. that people want, things like barley wines. And then also,
complexity.
yeah, more complexity. The roast, I believe, some of the higher kill malts provide almost like an antioxidant type of compound that helps protect the beer from some of the oxidative staling as well. You know, like anything, and we talked about this some in the previous show, it's always going to be barrel dependent. If you're using a fresh oak barrel, you're going to get oak really quick unless it's a larger barrel. And even then, you can get too much oak before you can start extracting some of those caramel and vanilla flavors. You're just going to get kind of a woody character, a tannic woody, very quickly. So it's always going to be time and barrel dependent. Just like you would do with sour beers, I would store your clean beers at a lower temperature, 20 at maximum 20 degrees Celsius, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, the amount of oxygen, certain barrels will produce, will allow through. Tighter American oak. What were you say, John?
Well, yeah, that's the quality of the barrel has a lot to do with how much oxygen that barrel lets in to the beer to get some of this complexity development. So,
and heads, they can do different types of heads.
Yeah. And bungs, and Julian Schrago had a really good article in the Master Brewers Technical Quarterly last quarter, and he talked about looking for barrels that have fewer staves. That is, high quality wide staves on the barrel indicates, or wider staves indicates a higher quality barrel, less oxygen permeability than a barrel made with a lot more narrow staves. Those barrels will admit more oxygen through those interfaces. And one thing to think about when you're looking at or sourcing your barrels for your beers.
I think that, but I don't see a lot of barrels with a lot of narrow staves or a lot of wide staves. They tend to be
pretty consistent these days.
Yeah, a range of them. I guess there might be some really expensive barrels, just all wide staves. I've never seen any barrels with all really narrow staves, unless it's maybe whiskey barrels or something like that. I would believe that has an effect, but I don't know how selectable that is. I think the thing that we can select for much more easily is whether it's American oak or French oak. If you can get down to the particulars of what oak it was exactly and where it came from and what region, then I think you can maybe dial in a bit more. I think Julian's right about wanting to select for oxygen permeability, like I said.
It's a consideration when you're
right. And if you have a choice of two barrels sitting there and one's got a bunch of wider staves, one's got a bunch of narrow ones. Of course, it depends on how well fit they are. How the cooper worked on it, and then also the thickness of the staves can play a big part. A thicker stave is going to have less oxygen permeability than a thinner one, and then the type of oak, the denser the grain, American oak, will restrict the amount of oxygen as well.
Yeah, I didn't mean to derail you there.
No.
What are some examples of malty beers that you've put in barrels?
Oh my gosh, the traditional imperial stout, but also a lot of these rich Belgian beers.
Like the Belgian Dark Strong.
Yeah, exactly. I like doing those. We've even done an Oktoberfest. Recently, we did a tequila barrel. We've done, Doppelbock. We've done porters. We've done brown ales. We did there was a collab with Moonlight Meadery. our good friend Michael Fairbrother, that we did 4 years ago, for this high ABV, high honey beer. And we've put that in barrels. And we've been trying to sour it a little bit over the past 4 years and get some Brit character in there. It's actually turning out pretty amazing at this point. But that's something that we did that was actually pretty malty as well. And I think there's no limit to what you can do. It's just based on your imagination. It's what the barrel is. The thing to be cautious of, I think, a lot of times is when you have something like a tequila barrel, you got to be very careful about putting something too flavorful or malty or rich in a lighter barrel. The tequila flavor, sure, but it's not that strong, especially something like a Chardonnay barrel or a red wine barrel. I see this all the time. Imperial stout in a red wine barrel. It's like you're not going to taste any of the red wine character in that.
Oh,
I mean, you just don't get any. I mean, it just tends to be buried. I suppose you get maybe some, but I don't know.
Some tannic redness kind of thing.
Yeah, you tend to just overwhelm it with the beer. You put an Imperial Stout in a Chardonnay barrel, it's like, well, there you just wasted your barrel. I mean, it's still fine. You still get your oxidative and your temperature staling, and you can still extract some wood character, but you're not going to get the character of, the barrel flavor like we talked about in the last show.
Mm-hmm.
You're not
like
going
a
to
whiskey
get that.
or rum,
right? Or it has to be something bolder like a whiskey or rum. Something light just doesn't tend to carry through. So you just need to be careful about what kind of beer you're going to put in. You put in a light lager in something like a Chardonnay barrel, okay, well then, you can get some of that Chardonnay fruitiness, some of that Chardonnay sulfur, some of that oak, and that could go very nicely with, Munich Helles or something like that. So,
yeah.
I just wouldn't put in, an intense Imperial Stout. All right.
Right.
I think we've run long. Why don't we take our first break? And when we come back, we've got more barrel information for you. We're going to talk about the types of barrels that you might be using right after this.
Natural beer guys that make other beer guys look like wine guys. Brew Strong.
Barrels and barrel aging, everything barrel goodie wise.
Yeah. Yummy stuff.
I tell you, I tried a hop, an experimental hop from Yakima Chief that makes beer taste as if it was barrel aged.
Huh.
They gave me a beer, blind. They said, "Here, taste this, and tell me what you think it is." And my answer was, "Well, I don't know what it is, but barrel aged something, 100% barrel aged something." And no, it was just all kinds of tannins and like oaky wood tannins from this experimental hop. Found it pretty interesting.
That would be, yeah. It's amazing what they're doing with hops these days. I mean,
Yeah.
I was just up at Yakima Chief for the harvest, and we got a chance to go through the experimental fields. And a lot of these crosses have been, Jason Peralt's gone through and tagged them with yellow ribbons, something to keep an eye on, as they go forward. And it was really fun to rub some of those hops and see what interesting, herbal and fruit flavors that they're coming off those.
I think it's fascinating as well, and would love to try a lot of that stuff. The I don't want anyone thinking that that's the way to get barrel aged flavor, of course, because it would be vastly cheaper to just use like some oak granules and throw those in there, or some oak shred, or even some oak extract. Just throw that in to get more of that tannic thing. The problem is, you can get those flavors up front, but it's just giving you a woody flavor. And really, for good barrel aging, I think you need those long-term oxidative staling compounds to, or the souring or whatever, to develop these other flavors that kind of go hand in hand with those tannin characters, right?
Yeah, you need the full complexity, not just the singular tannic note or the singular vanilla note. You really do need that whole complement to actually taste better.
Right, the caramel, the vanilla, the oak, they all go hand in hand. So barrel types. Generally, people are looking at wine barrels and whiskey bourbon barrels. There's some other barrels out there, but the majority are doing that. Wine barrels are going to produce a more delicate flavor. They're more durable barrels. They're much thicker barrels. They tend to be larger than the whiskey barrels. Tend to be 53 U.S. gallons. The wine barrels tend to be about 60 U.S. gallons. The wine barrels are much thicker, much better built. You can stack them higher. You can reuse them far more than you can the whiskey barrels. They don't leak as much as the whiskey barrels. Wine barrels tend to be really well made. People have paid $1,000, $2,000 for each of these barrels. You can find them, in various places cheaper. We'll talk about that later on. But the thing to get away from it is it's very solid. They generally do not have as much toast and no char in these barrels. However, I've taken barrels to a reconditioning place. I've taken wine barrels, and they will take them apart, and they will give them a whiskey char on the inside. And the nice thing about those wine barrels is they're just so durable and so reusable. If you're doing a sour barrel program and you have these wine barrels, you can use them probably until you die. They will get consumed from the inside by the Brett eventually. Things will happen to them, but extremely, a good investment. And if you are willing to take neutral barrels, which for a sour program I highly suggest you do, they can be cheap. You can get them down, $25, $10 if you buy 1,000 of them, $25 to $50 if you're buying a 100 or a couple hundred.
Well, define that again quickly. A neutral barrel. That's like a,
So wine barrels, theoretically, once the oak has all been extracted, um, the winemakers consider them neutral barrels. No
okay.
oak character is going to come through. Um, I've been given neutral barrels though that still had oak character coming through, and at that point they have a choice. They can use them as neutral barrels. They can add, oak staves inside or some other oak in it to produce that oak flavor, or they just sell them off. Most of the wineries, especially in Napa, they set aside the neutral barrels and then they just sell them off for whatever they can get for them, planter money or whatever. So that's wine barrels. You're going to find them all around the world, and they're going to be, wherever there's wineries, and there are wineries literally around the world. And I would just get in contact with your local winery. Don't be annoying. There's certain times of the year that they empty your barrels, and you want to contact them before that, and say, hey, when it comes time, and you've got some empty neutral barrels, I'd like to, get them from me if and see what they're willing to do. Again, they've paid, $1,000, $1,500 maybe or more for these barrels. Now, if they've used them a few times, then they're like, okay, the value's like $50. Some of these guys will be like, yeah, it's $400. Don't pay that. $100 for a Chardonnay barrel that's still got maybe a use left in it with a little bit of oak. Things that are truly neutral. Some of the older barrels, $50. $50 to $100, depending on how nice a barrel it is. And then if you're buying in bulk, try and get them below 50.
Okay.
Let's see here. Whiskey, bourbon barrels. They're thin barrels. They're meant to be used once. It's new American oak. It's a legal requirement in the U.S. So they're very thin. I wouldn't say poorly made. They're just made for that one fill and that's it. And so they tend to leak a lot more. You can't stack them as high. Once they dry out, they're more difficult to get sealed up.
Mm-hmm. How thin are we talking? Like quarter inch, half inch?
Oh, that's a good question. I thought Bevo had the answer.
Flagging you down.
No, I would say I just see something very ghostly waving around out of the corner of my eye, and you could use a little more sun. I'm just saying, it's getting you're working in the office too much. Sure you are.
You want me to turn your microphone on?
That'd be great. I was acknowledging that I just got your email and I was thanking you for it.
Oh.
And you, I'm tan actually right now. This is tan for me.
Well, I can see you, so you must have some tan going on.
Yeah. Well, shut up.
Not invisible.
Beacons of Gondor.
I'm done with you.
You look beautiful. What was I talking about? They're thin. I thought Bevo had the answer, but apparently she did not. Yeah, I would say it's in that at least it's more than a quarter. It's 3/8, half inch.
Okay.
And then the wine barrels, they're 3/4 or so. I mean, they're pretty thick.
Yeah.
It's the reason why you make like Adirondack chairs out of wine barrels and not out of whiskey barrels.
Oh, there you go.
Because a whiskey barrel one would not support my fat ass. But one of the things you're getting from the whiskey barrels are bolder flavors. It's been the whiskey or bourbon has quite an intense flavor to it for a given volume, and the char in the barrels has quite a bit of flavor still, and you are going to get more of those flavors even over time from a whiskey barrel than you will out of a wine barrel. Wine is a much more delicate flavor. It's intended to have a delicate oak character to it and not a bold oak character. And so, they're lightly toasted, whereas whiskey is all the color in whiskey, all the flavor in whiskey. Well, not all the flavor, but all the color comes from the barrel, from the char. Whiskey is white until they're perfectly clear until it goes into the barrel and can develop those flavors over time. So, that's what you're getting into your beer when you go those types. There's other kinds of barrels too. Port, sherry, which are essentially types of wine barrels. Tequila, rum, gin. People are barrel aging gins now. We're barrel aging some gin at Heretic, and I'm curious to as to what kind of beer we're gonna throw back in there and see. It was gin that went into a tequila barrel, and then after we're done with that, we're gonna try a beer in it and see what happens. I know people have done Tabasco barrels.
Oh,
wow. And it tends to be pretty intense. Tabasco is actually quite a vinegary product, and they have vinegar barrels as well. So I'm not really sure what happens. And the beer barrels, if you use a barrel for, let's say you get a whiskey barrel and you put an imperial stout in it. After you've done that, you could do another beer. What we found, and I'm not sure this is really true, but my guys are convinced, and I'm kind of leaning that way, is that the second use of a whiskey or bourbon barrel always tends to get infected or sour. So we get them fresh, and then we use them once, and then we either get rid of them or we move them over to the sour program. So we've done a porter in those bourbon barrels. After the imperial stout's out, we will do a porter in there. We'll add some Brett and bacteria, and then we'll do cherries, and we call that Cruel Beauty. There's a number of things you can do with them as long as it's holding liquid and it's tight. By the end of barrel aging a beer in bourbon or whiskey barrels, you're ready to get rid of some of them because they've just created a mess. And so those you're going to dump. You're going to get rid of those barrels. The others you might keep. But I would always look at the whiskey and bourbon barrels as almost like a one use, whereas wine barrels you can use over and over. One of the other things is, and maybe we'll get into this in packaging, you need to test your beers. That if you're making a clean beer, a supposed clean beer that's bourbon barrel aged or barrel aged, you need to test to make sure that beer is clean before you package it, because you don't want exploding cans, you don't want overcarbonated kegs, things like that. So
right.
It's one of those other things to worry about. And of course, when you're looking at barrels and barrel types, size matters. Your ratio of beer to surface area is going to affect the extraction rate of all these flavor compounds, how much oxygen is going to go in, and what your final product's going to be. You can do some small ones and some big ones. You can do barrels and keep some beer in stainless. There's a lot of options there. They have whiskey and bourbon barrels. They're run about 200 liters. The wine barrels run around 225 liters, so about 53 gallons, about 60 gallons. There's hogsheads. They run 240 to 300 liters. Puncheons, they're 475 to 500 liters. And then pipes, 550 to 630 liters. And then the fooder, they come in various sizes as well, to quite large. And the effect of the smaller barrels, you can get them down to, boy, I've seen it at 5. I want to say I've seen them even smaller than 5 gallons. Have you, John?
Yeah, I've seen like
a 1 gallon.
Yeah, 1 or 2 and 2.5, something like that. Yeah, I've seen some small ones,
which I think is crazy, because all you're gonna do is get,
tons of oak,
tons of oak. Your surface to liquid ratio, and then the effort that goes in. I think it's better time spent to brew a lot more beer and fill a regular sized barrel and get good results, and then have a bunch of beer at the end that you can bottle up and enjoy for 5 years, than it is to try and do something quick in a small barrel of questionable, because I don't know of any really valid barrel maker that's making 2-gallon barrels. I think they're more novelty stuff, maybe out of China. I may be totally wrong, and please forgive me if I'm insulting one of the barrel makers that's making these tiny things. But I think most of them would be like, well, why would you do that? So they tend to, a good compromise is maybe like a 30-gallon. You get some flavor and color pretty quick, but something like that. But I really wouldn't go smaller than that. I tend to try and make the beer to fill up the larger vessel. You could brew into 10 carboys or 11 carboys, and just keep it there. If it takes you a month to brew the beer, as long as it's clean, and you keep it at a moderate temperature, and you transfer it off the yeast at some point, you could store it, uncarbonated, in the carboy for a month or two.
That's a good point to bring up, is getting the beer off the yeast before you put it in the barrel.
Yes,
because you don't want any autolysis flavors.
Right. You brew the beer, you let the yeast settle out, and you transfer only the beer to the vessel. If you're going to add any more yeast, it needs to be something like Brett, or organisms. It could be bacteria, because if you just transfer all that yeast in there, it's going to die, become meaty. I taste that fairly frequently in competitions. It's just this meaty.
Soy sauce, umami.
Vegemite type of thing in some of these barrel-aged beers. And it's clear that people, you don't want to ferment in the barrel. You don't want to transfer all this yeast into the barrel. You want to go clean. And it makes a substantial difference. Have I said everything I want to say about that? I would personally, just figure out a way. A lot of clubs will do it together. They will brew. 10 people will brew 5 gallons, and they'll fill a whiskey barrel together, and that could be quite nice too. One of the nice things is any variance in brewing tends to be evened out across 10 or 11 people. As long as everybody can brew clean and there's no sour organisms in there, it's a great way to go, because all those slight things that are different between everybody's brew system, it averages out to make something quite nice.
Yeah, that's what my club did many years ago. We got a wine barrel from Firestone and brewed a brown ale, and very nice, wood-aged brown. Just the wood character on top of the brown ale gave it a nice dimension. And then subsequent brews we did with that barrel actually started souring, and so we got into like the Ode Brewing, sour brown ales that turned out very nicely from that.
There you go. All right, let's do this. Let's take another short break. When we come back, we're going to talk more, of course, about barrel aging, but in specific, I think we're going to talk about sourcing your barrel and other things like that. We'll be back right after this.
City.
about everything about barrels, and barrel aging, everything you need to know about getting your barrel program going, and why. Even on the homebrew scale, if you're talking about one barrel, you're talking about your barrel program. One of the things that people ask me frequently is, where do I get barrels? How do I source a barrel? A lot of times, homebrewers are just like so thrilled to have access to one of our used barrels. I'm like, there's barrels available, and maybe it seems too easy to me, but the first step, go around, look for your distilleries and wineries around you, the people who use barrels everywhere. Especially in the U.S., there's distilleries popping up all over the place, and there's wineries all over the place. And at some point, they're done with a barrel. And the trick is to just be friendly to them, say hi, maybe go take them some of your home brew, introduce yourself. Don't bother them when they're busy, but just say, hey, when you have some used barrels, I'm interested. I'm willing to, purchase some barrels. Same thing goes on the commercial level. Take them some beer. Just say, hey, I'm the brewery, down the road. We'd love to work local. We'd love to work with you on, utilizing some of your barrels in our, barrel aging program. And when we do package that beer, we'd be happy to, perhaps, mention that they were your barrels and that, you used them last, and, give you some promotion as well. And, once you introduce yourself and talk to them like that, you'll be surprised at how many of them are just saying, like, yeah, I'd be happy to deal some barrels to you. And, whether it's one or two or, taking everything they got, your price will vary, but you'd be surprised. They're creative people as well, producing something just like, brewers are. And especially when you share some beer, a lot of them are very, they'll open up and help you out. There are barrel brokers as well, and not to, go around barrel brokers or to demean barrel brokers, but, when you go through a barrel broker, it will help you get access to a lot of barrels, but understand that the price can be higher. Now, if you don't have a local distillery or winery, if you don't, if you're looking for something special like tequila barrels, they only come from Mexico because it's the only place that can make tequila. Now you can get agave barrels, but you can't get truly, tequila barrels unless they come from Mexico. Some of those things can be hard to find. You really need to go through a broker. But if you're looking for wine barrels, distillery barrels, look locally. I prefer a local source, one, because it tells a nicer story sometimes, most of the time, and it's generally cheaper. Your transportation's much less. It's very expensive to ship barrels. They only fit maybe 4 to a pallet. Depends on the size of the barrels. And, the price of shipping a pallet nowadays has really gone up. So really adds to the cost. You can end up being $400 each into barrels if you're not careful. You need to keep that cost down so that you can sell the beer and make a profit. If you're commercial, or if you're home brewing and have tons of money to throw away, then well, it doesn't matter. But
what should people look for in the quality of the barrel that they are purchasing?
That's an excellent question. So if you're looking for cheaper barrels, sometimes you're gonna possibly run into problem barrels. Doesn't mean that they're not necessarily worth buying or taking, because a lot of the problems can be fixed. There's a few things you should look for that just are more of a pain, and probably preclude you from taking that barrel. Moldy smells. Open the bung, sniff inside. If you smell mold or take a flashlight, always take a flashlight and look inside if you're inspecting barrels. If you see mold inside, it can be fixed, but it's going to take you money and time. If you're getting the barrel for like $5 and otherwise it looks good, you might take a flyer on it. Mold is not necessarily the problem to beer as it is to wine, and it's really no problem for spirits a lot of time. Once you get rid of it, the flavor doesn't necessarily go into what you're doing, but it's something to watch out for. If it's in a lot of mold and has a really pungent aroma, I'd skip that barrel. Beetle holes. Now you'll see these on the heads and around the heads. Small, there's a boring beetle that comes out every like May to July in the United States.
Oh, you mean like Ringo?
Yes, and he will play on the drum heads of your barrels and make a whole bunch of little holes. They lay some eggs, and these will eventually cause leaks. It may actually be leaking. If you see any beetle holes, just skip those. Again, it can be repaired, but you want to skip it. Untreated water. If there is water inside the barrel that is just sitting there, rainwater or something like that, you got to be careful. Again, that can cause all sorts of bacteria and mold. Generally, what you want is a compound of essentially Camden and citric acid that will preserve it. Another one is to look for cracking staves. So these staves are bent, and sometimes they will split. They still hold water, but they will pop and they will crack across the stave. And this is something you want to avoid because that's going to become a really weak point. If you're stacking a lot of the barrels, these can pop. I haven't had it happen. I've got a lot of cracked staves, but I would just avoid if you're buying barrels, cracked staves. Loose heads. If the head wiggles around a lot, if the bands are loose, the barrel's dried out. The people who make barrels, they will tell you that as long as the barrel doesn't get damaged or things get shifted out of place, every well-made barrel will swell up again tight. The reason that the bands are loose, the reason that heads are loose is because the barrel dried out and the wood shrank. If you add water back to it, hot water, or your barrel solution back to it, and give it time, eventually it should return and seal back up. I've had barrels that have taken 3 days and 1,000 gallons of water, but eventually they sealed back up. And, things that seemed impossible to seal up, where you could see daylight through the staves, they've sealed up before. So it is possible, but in general, things that have dried out, you need to get them cheap. Anything with any of these problems may not be the end of them, but you just have to be aware that it's going to take some fixing. And if you don't have the time, if you're homebrewing and you want to have fun, you can take any barrel. Just if you can get a barrel for free for $5, I'd take a flyer on it, and while I'm out there having a beer, I'd fiddle around fixing it up, and you can make it work. And then there's also the whiskey fungus barrels. Again, I would avoid those if there's not necessarily avoid those, but there is a specific whiskey fungus that you'll see that may not be actually an issue for your beer. So those are some of the things.
You're saying it's a positive thing? I mean, it adds complexity, or no?
No. It is a common fungus that happens on whiskey barrels, and you'll see it just coating the outsides. It does not mean that it is
got on the inside,
right? Because it tends to form when whiskey is leaking or spilled or something like that, and when it's leaking out of the barrels. It could be a sign that the barrel is quite leaky as well.
Okay.
So that's one of the things to kind of look out for. The main thing you don't want is, especially in a production environment, a commercial environment, is a ton of work fixing barrels. I've done that before, and these are all things that I've purchased in this list. I've done all these. So if you're willing to do the work, if not, it depends on the price of the barrel and how desperate you are for barrels. And it would go without saying that, anything with moldy smells, untreated water, those types of things, you're going to have to strip out what's in there with hot water and solutions to remove all that. And it can be refreshed. It's just, don't count on any flavors from what was in the barrel before. That's just not going to happen. And you can also take these things apart and get them retoasted and bored out as well. So it doesn't mean that the barrel's a goner. It's just
Yeah. But that's another reason to use a wine barrel that was thicker.
Yes.
And able to be reconditioned better.
Right. I've reconditioned whiskey barrels as well, and you get about one shot because they'll brush out the previous, and then they'll rechar them. It's an amazing process, but it ends up. I think you can only do it once, really.
Yeah.
You might be able to get away with twice, but they're thin to start with.
Yeah.
All right. One of the things that people talk about a lot of times is barrel alternatives. So, spirals, slats, chips, granular oak, extract, things like that. For a commercial brewer, I would say, and even a home brewer, it kind of loses the cool factor. You didn't barrel age; you threw in wood into your beer and let it soak in there. Can you call that barrel aged? I don't think so. You can call it wood aged.
Wood aged, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now that's still could be cool and still could taste pretty good. They even have special barrels that have slots, like stainless steel with slots for putting wood in to, the modern new barrel. Again, I don't see how you could call that barrel aged. I think some people are, the stainless barrels with inserts are calling it barrel aged. I think it's a little bit dishonest, maybe.
Stretching it, yeah.
Yeah. The alternatives that you can use, there's spirals, and the reason they spiral the oak, just Google oak spirals. The reason they spiral them is to get more surface area, of course. There's slats, which are like a thinner piece of wood. There's chips, which again kind of give you more surface area. One of the reasons they do chips is it kind of seems more natural they're kind of split along the grain type of thing. Mm-hmm. They'll do cubes of different sizes. There's even like little balls that people use. I think
are all of these kind of single use though? You don't really reuse them.
You could reuse them, I guess. You'll get less oak extract out of them.
I would think the chips would fall apart pretty much, but
they kind of hold together. The balls, I think one of the advantages of the balls is that if you're loose balling it, they'll come back out of your bung pretty easy. You put those balls in your bung, and
do you put them on a string or no?
No, you could. They have like the slats on a string, but they don't have the balls on the string. I think if you had nice big balls on a string that just fit real snug through the bung, you could dangle that in there, hold on to the string and, put the bung back in. And then, later on you could just pull them out, pop, pop as you want to pull them out. You put a long string of balls in your bung, in the barrel.
Yeah,
I think that might be good. And one of the things I think about the balls is, if you're, once you've got your beer out, and it's time to wash the barrel and all that, your balls will roll out of your bung much easier than chips or cubes. They can be very difficult to get out back through your bung. So you want a smooth thing if you're going to put it in your bung, because it'll come back out much easier, in and out with the balls.
Yeah, good practical tip there.
Yeah. The oak extract, somebody has done the job of extracting the oak flavor, and you can just pour it in. In a way, this is a more efficient use of your barrels and wood in general, because, these barrels, they have a finite life, especially if you're looking at oak flavor. And, you can add back a little bit of fresh oak character, whether it be chips or balls or cubes or granules or spirals or whatever. And you can get these things nowadays in a wide array of toast levels, charred. You can get any of these to add, and you could put them in, a carboy. You could put them in, a plastic bucket, whatever you're storing your beer in. Even in a keg, you could add these things and develop some of the flavor. One of the things I like about using these things in a keg is that you can put them in, and then you can take your time in tasting them. Weekly, pour yourself a little bit, and see how that flavor is developing. One thing I need to say is wood soaked in spirits. It's not the same as a barrel. All the time you're like, well, I'm going to soak some oak. I've been soaking oak cubes for a week in bourbon, and now I'm going to add them to my beer, and that's going to somehow be. I'm like, you might as well, and we've talked about this before, you might as well just pour the bourbon in. I don't think that you're going to get, the true character of a barrel, that's been sitting for 5 years or 10 years. You're not going to get that by putting oak chips in, some Old Yeller for a week. It's not the same thing. Stop thinking it's the same thing. I mean, you can do it. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, that goes back to our faster, better, cheaper argument.
Right. I had a supplier bring some samples by of, they're like, oh, we've, soaked this in this and that, and we tried them all, and they were exactly what, we say not to do. I mean, it just, people are trying it, but I do not think that it is necessarily the best. All right. I think that's going to pretty much wrap us up for this show. And Justin,
yeah.
I think that's been solid.
That was great. That was wonderful.
Solid as oak.
Yep. Solid as
firm and hard
as wood.
As a piece of good old American oak.
Yes.
Well, and we will continue the next show. We're going to get into some of the woods that different types of woods that you can use, barrel maintenance, sealing up barrels. We've got barrel cleaning.
Lots to cover.
Barrel dry storage, bung types. Look at those bungs.
Yeah. Those are good looking bungs.
Logging, storing, harvesting. We got a lot still. We still got a lot to cover.
All right, I love it. I did want to mention, because it just fell into my inbox, but the American Homebrewers Association, which you should be a member of if you're not already.
Absolutely.
And you can do that by clicking the AHA link right on the BrewingNetwork.com. It's there on the left side. That helps us out a little bit, but it mostly helps you out by becoming a member of such a great organization who puts on what is now known as HomebrewCon.
Right.
In 2020, that is in Nashville.
Nice.
which I'm super excited about because I love that town. So that's in Nashville. And anyhow, you can now submit a proposal to be a speaker at HomebrewCon. They just sent out the invite for that. The deadline to submit is Tuesday, December 17th. You can probably go to homebrewcon.org, and there will be a submission button there. John Palmer has been a speaker several times. Jamil has been a speaker several times. Even I was accepted once.
Let's not ruin the experience here.
So
I'm planning on being at that conference. I'm doing a little roadie from Houston with my friend Travis and Peter from Australia.
Yeah,
and,
nice.
We're all planning on jumping in some rental car and abusing it all the way to Nashville.
I like it. It's happening. That's not until June 18th through the 20th. But you can submit your proposal now. Anything related to homebrewing, craft beer, or beer culture, they will review your submission and
foods, equipment.
Yeah,
everything.
So go over to homebrewcon.org, and once again, the deadline to submit is December 17th. So it's coming up already.
There
Yeah.
There you go. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Another excellent show, John.
Yeah.
I think we're digging deep into the barrels.
We are.
We're in the bung, out of the bung. We're all over the bung.
Well, we'll have more to cover in the next show. That'll be fun.
Yeah, I think we still have a lot to talk about when it comes to barrels, and especially handling the barrels and maintaining the barrels. Big question for people. So, make sure you check out our fine sponsors. Make sure you check out BlickmanEngineering.com. Send the guy an email at feedback@BlickmanEngineering.com. Tell him how much you love the show and you appreciate that he pays for it. That's what keeps it free for you to download. Till then, everybody, brew strong.
Brew strong, everyone.